right, folks, welcome to the second episode of LA Sessions. And so, like I said, in episode 0, which would make this technically 1, but we're not gonna count it like that.
Godzilla would be -1.
That's true. Hell of a movie. I didn't see the re-release, by the way. Supposedly, there's new scenes, and
Oh, no kidding. I didn't
kicking
see the
myself.
black and white one either.
Man, that was an awesome movie, though. Yeah. But so today we're going to be covering environmental protest, which is a little departure from the usual mental health topics that I generally cover on the podcast. But I do think there is a mental health component to it, which we'll definitely get into. But today I wanted to introduce our guest, Willie Costa. He is not in the mental health field, but he is definitely in the scientific field, and I'll let him introduce himself. So welcome, Willie.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I'm not in the environmental protest field either. Thank God for that. My name is Willie. I'm an aerospace engineer by training. Graduated from Cal Poly and went to Penn State for my master's. Went back to Penn State when I sold my soul for finance education. So I did work at Boeing. Don't hold that against me. Everybody needs a first job. And no, I was not responsible for the unpleasantness. Let's just get that out in the open. Did some work for the Navy as a civil servant and rotary wing for the normal people out there. That means helicopters. And did a lot of work on the other side of the fence as a contractor, or as we call them, a shopper, because I'm not the sort that likes bureaucracy. So most of my focuses have been on primarily aerostructures. I've also worked on what we call configuration design. So when you think of designing a plane and you think drawing pretty pictures, that's called configuration design. I've done a lot of work in flight testing, wind tunnel testing, both aerodynamics and structures, and also motorsports, believe it or not. Served as an advisor because it didn't pay me for Penn State's Formula SAE team, which for those who are not familiar, it's actually pretty fucking cool. Get a bunch of college kids together and they design and build their own race cars every single year, pretty much from scratch.
Nice.
And I'm the co-author of that right there, which is a book on rocket design published by AIAA. And I actually wrote that with my friend and colleague, Dr. Don Edberg, who was one of my undergrad professors. So, believe it or not, you actually can get more out of school than just grades. I think that's a good summary of me.
Yeah, and I know currently though you have other endeavors that are on paper unrelated at all to aeronautics and things like that, right?
So I do work in finance and investments. I'm the co-founder of a company called Garrison Fathom. I've also done diligence work on various investments for the engineering space, but it's predominantly transportation, manufacturing, and yes, also critical and rare earth minerals, which play directly into the environmental topic of today's episode.
Yeah. So it has to be asked. I'm sure some listeners may be wondering, how does a rocket engineer go to work in the finance field?
Well, I'm going to channel my inner Zachary Quinto from the movie Margin Call. It's you're changing what you're adding up, and the compensation is significantly more attractive. If you haven't watched that movie, it's fantastic. No, so believe it or not, what I didn't know until I was already in B school, there's actually a lot of engineers on Wall Street, not just on the diligence side where you're actually doing the engineering, but on the trading side and what people think of more frequently when they hear finance. I guess the rigor involved in learning the mathematics and, more importantly, the problem-solving approach and engineering is quite in demand in the finance capital of the world. So This is one of those things you don't know until you're in it, or you find out about it through some weird avenue.
Got it. Cool. Welcome. And so, yeah, people, today we're talking about environmental protests. So let's discuss.
Get a job.
So, environmental protests, civil disobedience, or rebels without a clue. Let's discuss. So, Willie, can you tell me, just given your scientific background, what are some of the pros and cons of renewable power like wind, solar, hydro, and anything else I'm missing?
Sure. Well, I mean, the easiest one is that you have a theoretically inexhaustible supply. Right now, you hear a lot when people protest the fossil fuel industries, like, "Oh, we're past peak oil, we're past whatever, we're running out." Okay, well, I'm not a geologist, I'm not a mining engineer, I can't comment on that. What I can comment on is that for at least another 4 billion years or so, the sun is going to continue to exist, and the sun is what drives a lot of our weather systems. So things like wind are going to continue to exist. So, from on a human timescale, these power sources are basically infinite, right? They're not in scale, but in terms of reusability. And I think that's one of the main uh, attractants to it is that you could, if you don't look too deeply into the equations behind the problem, you could have this infinite source of so-called free power that we can just take from nature like we're a bunch of elves, and we don't have any drawback or any consequences to it. uh, in reality, let's just be honest, a lot of this is not necessarily carbon free, and it's not necessarily clean. It's clean in the sense that you're not shoving natural gas into a turbine and spewing carbon dioxide and water vapor out the other end. It's clean in the sense that if the sun is shining, you don't have carcinogens like you would with a gas plant or a coal plant, even though skin cancer, it's caused by some kind of carcinogen. It's literally right there in the name. But there's an argument to be made, and that has been made very eloquently, with regard to not the way that the power is generated, but what goes into the machines that are used to generate the power. Okay, now, perfect example, wind turbine blades. Worked in composites for a little over 20 years now. The only composites that mean a damn are the ones that use epoxy resins or better. So if you have like radomes, you have cyanide esters, you have PMCs, BMIs. But most of the time you're using epoxy, which is a bisphenol based chemical. And nobody knows what that means until you say BPA. Everyone knows what that means.
Yes.
And everyone freaks the hell out.
If you ever bought Tupperware or like a water bottle, yep.
Right. Right. BPA free. The irony is that even though you're using BPA as a precursor, that's not what you're getting out. And trying to undo the chemical bonds with a microwave is fucking stupid. But there is still a lot of this fear and a lot of this dirty mindset behind these sort of power generation pushes, right? So composites, I mean, you have BPA, a lot of solar panels, you've got lead, silver, arsenic, cadmium. I don't recommend eating any of those. The EPA themselves consider some of the solar cell components to be hazardous waste. Okay, but I'd say moving back up a level. The big pro, and I think probably the biggest pro with this, and what doesn't get said enough, is energy independence. Okay, and we just had an election here in the U.S. Half the country are upset that their favorite imaginary friends didn't win. This is something that is absolutely critical because, yeah, people protest, but they neglect the fact that what they're protesting, the ability to coordinate and arrange the protests, is powered by 47 critical and rare earth minerals in their smartphone. It's powered by their computers. It's powered by the data centers that process all their requests, the copper that carries the data to and from. Like this whole notion of clean energy and energy independence goes a hell of a lot beyond the headlines. So if people think, oh, that's just theoretical. Well, no. What happened to oil prices when Russia invaded Ukraine? What happened to nickel prices when China had a little temper tantrum with Japan, or flooded the Australian market with what's called pig iron? These things extend a lot, much farther beyond. Well, I want to protest the coal plant that's opening up 18 states away from me that I'm never going to see. But that's kind of one of the things that I hope people get out of this. When you take what we in engineering call a systems level approach to problem solving, you need to look past the headlines. You need to look past, what makes you feel good. And I mean, look, I don't consider myself an environmentalist because I really hate that label. I forget what show it was. One of the characters says, "I love the wine, not the label." Uh, I'm well aware of what side my planet is buttered, so I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, let's just strip everything to bones and turn the entire world into Coruscant. But at the same time, there has to be a balance between protecting the environment, which last I checked is the only one we have, and just going off the fucking rails and protesting against everything, including the things that you need to continue surviving.
So, beyond some of the financial drawbacks like you've outlined, and
Mhm.
sort of maybe even beyond like this fantasy element that people have of renewable energy, that it's like you say, it's almost like described as like this well that just never runs out of water, but there's no
Right,
system that's that perfect.
right.
Can you think of like technical drawbacks that, like you said, go beyond the headlines, beyond the articles, that only like people in the science community would know? Like, what are some scientific drawbacks of, like I said, like hydro, wind, solar?
Well, sure. I mean, the easiest one is going to be for a lot of these, except for nuclear, which I guarantee I'm going to go on a tirade on
And by all
eventually.
means,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
cover
I
that.
mean, you're kind of married to your geography for a lot of these. Like, if you want to start a solar plant, okay, good for you. I won't invest, but that's your thing. Fine, do it. If you want to start a solar plant in upstate Maine, you're going to get a lot of raised eyebrows. Okay, things like that you have to put in the Southwest. Things like wind farms you have to put in the Midwest, West Texas on up through Tornado Alley. If you look at wind maps from USGS or NOAA or any other legitimate government source, legitimate scientific source, not mommy blogs, uh, that's where you're going to want to situate all of your stuff. So you have this kind of geographic constraint, depending on the power source that you want to use. Coal. Okay, yeah, you have constraints. Well, I'm sitting in Pennsylvania, half hour from, or maybe an hour from Carbon County. Well, why the hell do you think they call it Carbon County? You do have some geographic limitations, but part of the reason why we've been on fossil fuels for so long, aside from the fact that they're incredibly energy dense, is that you don't have this tyranny of location. Like, if I want to open up a gas plant in North Dakota, uh, nothing's theoretically stopping me. I can get the gas piped in there. I can get coal shipped in there if I'm doing a cogen plant, whatever. And that's honestly one of and the other big thing is, yeah, it's an infinite well. The sun's going to be around for 4 billion years, give or take. But it's just ignoring the upfront costs. It's the always on mentality of fossil fuels. And that's one of the things, again, we're going back to nuclear. When the sun's not shining, your solar farm is not generating power. I think that can be accepted by both sides of the argument, right? No one's going to
Right.
argue to the contrary. When the wind isn't blowing, or conversely, when the wind is blowing too much and you get above the operating speed of your turbine, it's not producing power. So you have a storage requirement that is built in to the renewables part that you don't necessarily have with some of the other forms. Now, hydro, again, you are tidally driven. Yeah, the tide energy changes throughout the day, but you don't really have that much. And honestly, hydro and geothermal, I don't think get enough airtime when people talk about renewables. I don't know why. That's more of a psychological argument. I think that's in your swim lane
Right.
and not mine. But the hesitancy toward a lot of this, I think, is just uh, a lot of it is ignorance in the dictionary definition of the term, as in not knowing something, and a lot of it, I think, I'm going to piss off a lot of people when I say this. It's just ignorance in the form of stupidity. Like I think one of my favorite Netflix specials, I've told you this multiple times, was Ronnie Chang. When he talks about the internet, he said, "Who knew that giving people access to all of human knowledge would make them stupider?" And that's
Right.
not a direct quote, but it's something along those lines.
And
And
by the way, for listeners, if you haven't heard the comedic stylings of Ronnie Chang, please do so. Guy is
it's called Asian
hilarious.
Comedian Destroys America.
Yeah, his rants about his Singaporean passport and all that. Like, yeah, he's like, go ahead and cancel me. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
No,
my
he's
God.
yeah. No, he's
He
funny
was
as hell.
also in Crazy Rich Asians, right?
Right, right.
I still have to see that.
Awesome, great movie, by the way.
That's what I hear. That's what I
Yeah.
hear. Uh, but one of the things that I've noticed, and I again, if you're not a fan of history, that's too bad, because you should be. Science education and science innovation is one of the things that I've noticed, even in my lifetime, routinely unites both sides of the political aisle in this country, but only to kill it. So if you want, I mean, the first example I saw that, I was a kid in Time magazine, did an article on what's called a superconducting super collider, which was a particle accelerator that was being built in West Texas. And most people are like, what the fuck? We don't have any particle accelerators in West Texas. Well, we don't. We don't have them in East Texas either. We don't have them anywhere near. And the reason why was cost overruns and just this general frothing up of people's emotions toward viewing this as a wasted investment. Yeah, and that's the problem here arises, is that, yeah, we do have a social need for better power. I'm not going to prescribe which. I'm personally a fan of nuclear, as I said multiple times, and also hydrogen cars. But, a lot of this stuff has to be government funded, right? Like you can't go out and raise and say, I want $10 billion to build the James Webb Space Telescope, and there's no possibility of return whatsoever.
Right.
The return will be science. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure if you pitch that, they're not just going to say no, they're going to shoot you.
You're right.
So a lot of this has to be public funding, because it's only the government or government agencies that can take the financial hit to A, fund this thing, and B, if it goes wrong. I mean, people made such a big deal about Large Hadron Collider. I think it was 2013 or so.
Yep, I remember.
When they found the Higgs boson, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's the God particle." Well, the SSC that I just mentioned in Texas was 3.5 times the power level.
Wow.
of the LHC. So where would we be now as a species? Where would we be now in terms of our technological understanding? In terms of how we view ourselves, at the risk of sounding philosophical, how we view ourselves within the universe and within our own world, had we not killed that? Where would we be if we had actually continued to invest in things like breeder reactors and molten salt reactors and thorium reactors? By the way, China invested a giant pile of cash into those technologies. We talked about energy security and independence, right? Where would we be as a society if, instead of bitching about today's problems, we actually said, okay, yeah, today's problems are problems. Fine. Fuck that. Look 10 years, 20 years down the future. You say you want to change stuff. You don't want the status quo. Okay, well, how do we get there from here? What are you doing to help get us there? Well, I'm holding up a picket sign. Well, that's not helpful.
Yeah. A couple of topics that you brought up that I definitely want to address from, just a psychological lens is, I will say, like, one of One of the more intellectual shows of our time that's hidden as family entertainment, I always thought was The Simpsons. And I remember something
And
that,
prophecy.
yeah, and I remember something Principal Skinner once said when Lisa couldn't believe that Bart won the science fair by was having the hamster fly a plane, and whereas she was doing something like with scientific merit, and then Principal
Is my
Skinner,
brother stupider than a hamster? I think
right,
was
yeah, and then Principal
they
Skinner
just put
says,
the hamster in a scarf.
and he says, every good scientist is like half B.F. Skinner, half P.T. Barnum,
Yep.
and that the truth of the matter is, that is kind of true, because to go with your point about like government funded science endeavors, I think for our generation we always think of the space race, and
Yes.
it was and this is a whole different topic altogether, but I think the 70s, 80s was fueled by a lot of curiosity, but that curiosity was satisfied because of scientific discoveries, and actual, the government, for example, actually taking a stake in science. And yeah, while on paper, to my knowledge anyhow, there was no return on investment when it came to going into space and all that, at least not directly.
Right.
It was
Beat
just
the commies.
exactly,
Yeah.
beat the communists. But what it fueled for an entire generation. And look at you, you're literally a fucking rocket engineer. Like how many people became NASA engineers, SpaceX engineers, whatever, right? Because the natural curiosity they had. I know many people that did, but then that went away. Right.
Yeah.
And it almost took a privateer basically to spark interest again. And that privateer, of course, being Elon Musk, which I know probably by saying his name, a lot of people probably logged off right now. But whatever, this is that kind of podcast because
that's their loss, isn't it? Because they don't get to hear what you're about to say.
If they listen to episode 0, they would know that I'm not going to cover topics that are softball topics on here. And I don't want to bring people on that are just going to, toe the company line because they're afraid of pissing off their own constituents, which of course is ridiculous in and of itself. It means you're scared of your own allies. But, that's craziness to me. But anyway, it's this idea. And maybe I'll be fair, maybe this is a drawback of capitalism where a lot of things have to be rooted in some kind of profit. So I'll acknowledge that for sure. We're not like Star Trek where it's a scientific based community and all that.
Science communism.
Yeah, we're not that kind of society just yet. Personally, I always preferred the Klingons, but that's just my opinion. The Klingon Empire. But anyhow, yeah, a lot of it nowadays, has to be privately funded. But I'm seeing a little bit of that spark back at people of like whether, again, you love him or hate him, Elon has gotten some people talking about things, and of course there are people going to discredit him or whatnot, but I would say those people have a lack of imagination. However, the flip side of things, I would say, is the topic today is environmental protesters. Because here's the thing, you talked about like the scientific, like the merits of science, and just because obviously you got to be rooted in academia to do that, because science by its own logic is being able to replicate something over and over, or else it's theory and conjecture, right? Which of course, as we know, has no place in in protest, because you would think a protest would involve it's like a debate, a spirited debate. You get your point across, but you're open to the counter argument. But then it's for you to kind of decide that argument's not sound. But in this situation, I find it's one sided, and like we think of like on the news, like those protesters that destroy works of art. They do a human chain on the freeways, and I try to do a breakdown in my head of what goes through their mind when they do it. Because on the positive side, I look at it like this: as people, no matter how significant or insignificant you think you are, at an early age, we crave some form of uniqueness. I think we can agree on that. We want to be unique. It just so happens that sometimes the thing we think we're unique for, a lot of other people have it, but that's okay, because in the moment we thought it up. and it's fine. It gives our lives some sort of meaning because we crafted it out for ourselves. I mean, although sometimes it could be like we look up to our fathers and we emulate them. We have a cool uncle or an older cousin. We want to be like them, an older brother maybe, right? We want to be like them. But sometimes, in the absence of all of that, I think people will attach themselves to a lot of different things that they believe gives them uniqueness. I mean, I think a good film example of a movie you and I have watched before was what's that one with Ice Cube? They go to college. Michael Rappaport plays that white guy that becomes a skinhead.
Okay. Yeah.
God, who else was in that one? I think it was by John Singleton.
I mean, Higher Learning.
Higher Learning. You're right.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
he's just.
I did Google that in case
Yeah.
you heard
I'm
the
glad.
machine gun fire of my mechanical keyboard. I didn't memorize that shit.
Yeah, and for kids that are watching, Willie and I, we can type fast on a keyboard, not just on a phone. That's a skill in the '80s they made you learn. But Higher Learning was a movie where I think they did a pretty good job of showing that this Michael Rappaport's character was just rather unremarkable. He was just an average guy. He was what I call a jag, just another guy, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't that successful with women. He didn't stand out in any way. But he goes to college, he gets picked on by, some people, but then who takes him in are these skinheads,
Right.
That were played really, really well, ironically enough, by all Jewish actors.
Yep.
Yeah, it was like Cole Hauser was so good and creepy in that.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic in that. I mean, most of his roles, he's pretty unnerving. He's one of the few good highlights of Too Fast, Too Furious.
He's got that creepy voice. He's so good.
Yeah.
But like, and I think that's an example of how you're a guy that's kind of, like I said, I know I use the word unremarkable, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just sometimes we just got to find ourselves, and when we haven't found ourselves, we're just not that remarkable yet. But doesn't mean you have to stay that way. But he attached to an ideology that wasn't initially his, but he got sold on it. And then by the end of the movie, he was like an active shooter, right?
Yeah, he pulls Charles Whitman. He climbs on the roof with a sniper rifle and unloads into what I recall was a relatively peaceful rally.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the movie in decades. So
I know, right? But I think the idea though was it was a lot of it wasn't actually that far from the truth. It was clearly taken from somewhere. But that's what I mean. Sometimes people that maybe in the absence of uniqueness, in the absence of good mentor figures, people they can look up to, a good father figure maybe, they kind of gravitate towards any ideology that, one, will accept them, and two, they feel like they can add to it in some way. And I think environmental protesters are in that area, certainly in that domain, although I don't want to poo-poo on the whole idea of it. Like, I remember I used to have a coworker that I had great respect. His name was Steve. And he was a member of Greenpeace, but he was one of the old school guys. And I seem to recall, I asked him once, why don't you do that anymore? Because he was in his 50s by then. And he said, what it became isn't what I joined. Now it's about a lot of young people that haven't quite found themselves. And I mean, they just end up going in for the hookups. And he's just like,
I never once thought of that. That seems like a missed opportunity for my younger days.
Are we gonna go undercover? Are we gonna start wearing our hemp shirts?
Yeah, right. Like, why is this guy smoking his t-shirt?
But yeah, and so I think there's a little bit of dilution when it comes to any movement that how a grassroots movement can devolve into just something that vaguely resembles the initial vision. And I think modern, especially you add in social media and all that, it creates this this illusion of a real solid movement, I think, because just because you get 1 million views because people are watching you form a human chain, the reality is, the majority of those views they're watching because they're hoping someone punches you in the face. Right. And sometimes they get their patience rewarded.
Or the videos of the protesters are throwing, I think it was they threw oil or they spray painted the yacht that ended up. I think it ended up belonging to like I don't think it was one of the Russian oligarchs, but I remember reading it was some dude you really don't want to fuck with. Like I
Yeah,
think yeah, stuff like that. You have to understand. There's got to be better ways of going about it.
yeah, or I think again, sometimes the counter of social media is when they show the embarrassing clips. Like I think it was in Ireland or Britain where they formed a chain to stop an oil truck, but the
Yeah,
guy's like, "This is cooking oil." He's like, I'm transporting vegetable oil, and then there's the look of confusion. But I mean, again, it's like that counter programming and the sad part is I don't even know if the protesters themselves felt the same level of cringe and embarrassment that we, the viewer, felt, because I find that sometimes when people are so headfirst into an ideology, instead of saying, "Oh, my bad, I made a mistake," it's still, "Yeah, but," they'll find some reason like, "You're still running on gasoline," and blah, 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 you know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
so, just like the idea of, I'm gonna stop this freeway ramp, and I
Hmm.
know you're trying to go to work, but I'm gonna inconvenience you because that'll make you switch to my side. Now, anybody that's worth their salt in my field will be like, "No, you actually created probably an enemy for life." You
Yeah.
know, like, can you imagine someone's trying to go to the hospital or a job interview
Oh
or
yeah.
an otherwise like important trying to catch a flight, maybe, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, they will never ever side with you at that point. This isn't like Stockholm syndrome, right? They're not gonna suddenly be like, "Oh, you're my savior," or "We're gonna bond through your harming me." No, it
Right.
doesn't work like that, right?
No, there was one time I was in the Bay Area in California, as anyone who's not had the joy, the sexual pleasure of San Francisco rush hour, like, you are missing out. I recommend everyone go through that at least twice in their life, especially on a holiday. Like, don't just go on a Tuesday. No, go on Thanksgiving. Like, just really marinate in this, and then have your 2.5 hour drive take 4 hours because some jackasses walked onto the freeway and made the human chain to protest. And you're absolutely right. Like the overwhelming urge I had after that to sell my car, get an F-350 diesel, take off the exhaust device, and just roll coal all over every asshole. Just on the basic principle. It was almost overwhelming. Like if I wasn't already dirt broke at the time, I would have given that some serious thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just things like that. I have to ask you, like you obviously know a lot more about psychology than I do. I just know psycho. Like, why these people have to understand that, making absolute asses of themselves by defacing priceless works of art, or my favorite was those idiots that glued their hands to the floor of the stadium,
yeah,
or yeah, whatever. It's like, on some level they have to understand that this is only going to make people hate them,
yeah,
right? Or are they just so deluded and or stupid that they think this is a goal? I mean, think of all the effort that it takes to plan that, to coordinate,
oh,
and
for sure.
not to do a hot take, but to have the balls to walk out on the freeway. I don't even like get on the freeway in my car when I'm surrounded by 2.5 tons of metal.
Yeah,
But to walk out there on foot in the middle of one of the busiest highways in the nation, and it's like, no, you can honk at me, and I'm not going to move.
yeah,
Like, what could these people have accomplished if they had taken that kind of determination and, yes, courage? There's no other word for it,
yes, yes.
and actually applied it to something useful.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, a couple things to unpack. One is, I will definitely say that if you do a human chain on a freeway in Southern California, you're definitely courageous because everybody's packing. So
Yep.
you better unless you're bulletproof, you've got like the courage of Achilles there.
Our
But
cause will protect us
yeah,
from 9 millimeters.
but yeah. But to answer your question though, um, yeah. See, sometimes I've mentioned this in previous. appearances I've done where like I'm a big fan in sociology of Robert Merton's strain theory, and he goes. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but he goes over a lot of reasons why people either follow the rules, don't follow the rules, accept the rules of society, and whatnot. But there's a certain rebellious class that they rebel against the societal norms, and whether it's because they don't agree with it or they just don't fit into it, they don't accept those rituals of society, like get a job, have a family, take a vacation, repeat, right?
Right.
Well, maybe not repeat having a family. I don't know how many families people can have, but
well, we're not all dollar bill.
yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or like Nick Cannon, Dwight Howard, having like 12 kids. But yeah, they rebel against that. And in some ways, like it goes back to the uniqueness I mentioned earlier. Like we want to attach ourselves to an ideology sometimes in the absence of being taught something from a young age. Religion's not that different, I mean, we sometimes we are taught that at a young age, and maybe when we come of age, we can decide for ourselves, well, is that really what I want to do or whatever, But in this situation, yeah, they want to belong, but on their terms. And so they attach themselves to an ideology, whether it's this, joining a cult, which one could argue, I mean, they're very similar. I don't know if these environmentalist groups are drinking like poison Kool-Aid, but
we could be so we could hope. We should be so lucky.
But a lot of them, I find, at some point they get to a certain age and they realize, man, why the hell did I waste my time? I mean, but I would say that about a lot of things, certain ideologies people hold on to, whether it be, I mean, it's just my opinion here, but like, for example, I mean, everyone who knows and listens to my rants knows that I'm not a huge fan of like militant radical feminism. And I find that that's an ideology that some girls, when they become older women, they realize I shouldn't have attached myself to that. I lost a lot of good years. Just like some of those men in the other side of it, the men, those black-pilled men that are just like, oh, the world hates men, blah, blah, blah. And they attach themselves to this woman-hating
No, we
philosophy.
just hate you.
Yeah,
individually.
Yeah, right. They attach themselves to this ridiculous male-centric victimized mentality. And that then they realize, wow, I really should have spent that time educating myself on things, socializing myself, going to just getting exercise, basically the same shit a dog would do. Socialize, exercise, and they don't do that. So, and then they realize by then it's too late. The world has passed them by. So that's all I'm saying is when you attach yourself to a harmful ideology, but the irony is that it's harmful towards you, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And so some of these folks that, again, transition back to the environmental protesters, they are sometimes the power of belief is far stronger. And I'm sure you've seen this in the scientific community, what they got to put up with. The power of my belief and feelings is far more powerful than your proven methods and your repeatable experiments.
Are we talking about flat earthers?
Among other things, right? Like, again, it goes against the very thing they teach you in, like, literally Science 101 about experimentation.
The scientific method.
Like, it's that methodology is tried and true for a reason. But when you try to explain that, you get a lot of finger pointing, yelling, screaming, and there's no sense that's made because they don't go to these protests like a debate where they're like, let me hear you give me your best ideas against mine, and I'm going to see if it checks out. There's not that. It's just, I got to try to convince you by hook or by crook. And because this idea, like, I think they're actually spinning off an idea in advertising, believe it or not. I think this idea of, I'm sure you and our listeners have heard, there's no such thing as bad publicity, right? Like, that's why some of these celebrities, when they get caught in a scandal, well, damn, sometimes it actually helps them. Right. And so I think they have
public contrition and then watch your billables go up from the next film or election cycle or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, now granted, outside of something egregious like Bill Cosby or something like that, sometimes it helps them. Right. Like, I think the best example in, somewhat recent memory was like Kim Kardashian's sex tape, although I think there's rumors that it was.
Wait, she had a sex tape too?
As of the room that was. This was
I know there was, after the Paris Hilton one, there was like a rash of everybody had a
that's the
sex
thing,
tape that got leaked. I kind of just stopped paying attention.
because I mean, it's only my attitude on those things is it's only bad publicity if you apologize vehemently for it and you're like really, really hurt. But when it's almost like, did you leak it yourself or was this somehow coordinated? You know what I mean? It becomes a strategy now. And one could
Right.
argue that it took her status and everything to the next level, actually. So that
Sure,
I think
that.
that's the thing. But I think
So you're saying that your listeners should release sex tapes to advance their careers. That's what I heard.
Now, granted, it should be noted, they don't all look like Kim Kardashian, I'm sure. But I think these people think, yeah, these protests that are pissing people off, it brings, I think the comment you always hear from proponents of that is it brings awareness to our cause, and that's what we want.
Right.
We need big, flashy moments to get people to know these things. And my attitude on that is, and I think of an example my old coworker Steve once told me when he was with Greenpeace, and people can look this up. It's actually in the newspapers, by the way. He was a skilled climber by trade. He was a climber. Mm-hmm. That was his strength. And so they used that to have him and another gentleman climb this big area, Dow Chemical. This is like in the 70s, I think. So they could release like this 70-foot banner, I think, like anti-Dow Chemical banner. And so they had to sneak in there like a bunch of ninjas in the middle of the night, scale this really, really high obstruction just to get this banner to drop. So that the idea was that the New York Times or whatever photographer would come snap a picture of it. It would make headline news, and it got attention that way. And I think to a degree it worked, because here's the thing: they did it in the dead of night where it inconvenienced absolutely nobody. It didn't hurt traffic. It didn't make anybody late to work. But it did bring attention because, again, this would be way before social media. If you make headline news, that is a huge, huge deal. Because, Willie, like every dad in America had the same routine. Wake up, breakfast being ready, they sit there read the newspaper, right? That's what it gets ingrained in their head. And then if you get on the 6 o'clock news, same thing. And so nowadays it's different. It's, well, what do people respond to? Viral videos and prank videos, annoying stuff. But the difference is those are funny and effective because they're tongue-in-cheek. And that's, I think, the part where some of these environmental folks haven't quite caught on. They're like, one is as good as the other, but it's not. See? And so that's the thing. And I'm not a big fan of prank videos, but the ones where no one gets harmed, those are funny. They used to do that on, was it America's Funniest Home Videos and all that? And so that was different. But like when there's a clear victim, but it's a victim that you could see yourself being, like, dude, you could be thinking like, dude, I take that highway to work, but I called out today. That could have been me, right? You're going to have a visceral reaction to that. But they think that visceral reaction translates to, you know what? This guy made me miss work. I got chewed out by my boss. I missed productivity. But you know what? I'm going to use less fossil fuels. I'm going to trade in my BMW for a Tesla, for an EV,
for a turn signal,
for a Chevy Bolt, right, or something like that. Yeah, I'm gonna trade in my sporty, luxurious car for like basically a basket on wheels. It's like, sure, let's do that.
It's funny you mentioned you mentioned trading in for Tesla. Like I've always wondered why people justify what I call the operational cost of some of these decisions. Like, for those who don't, like, I spent several years living in Las Vegas, against my will, for the record. But all the Ubers out there are almost all of them are Tesla Model 3s. There's a lot of them, and I found out later it's because there's a leaseback program that you can get with Uber. Not important. What's important is that you ask every single driver if you dare have any human interaction, which I don't recommend. And like, well, how do you like this car? The first thing out of their mouth is always the same. It's a piece of shit because I have to charge it 3 times a day. Because guess what? Vegas gets a little warm
A
in the
little.
summer. Yeah, I think I sent you the shot of my dashboard when I left the gym at 11:30 at night, and it was 103.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, fuck that. And yeah. So their range gets degraded with the heat, and as people in Chicago learn, also with the cold. But it's just a lot of this stuff. I think people are clamoring for, and they don't understand, you know, what exactly it is that they're getting in return. Like I've talked to you about this multiple times. I call it. I didn't coin this term. It was coined to me. I like repeating it. I call it the rule of reverse innovation. Right? If you're an environmentalist, and you're really hard up on decreasing or eliminating use of fossil fuels, okay, good for you. I personally don't care. I don't have to agree with your standpoint. I'm happy that somebody feels strongly enough about something that they're actually going to do something about it, in theory. But the one thing that I've never had them answer is, okay, address the rule of reverse innovation. Let's pretend that gasoline and diesel was not the standard. By the way, that's exactly how automobiles started. The first cars were steam powered because that was the highest technology and the most well understood technology at the time. Petrol, gasoline cars didn't actually start taking off until Ford decided to get into it. But if let's pretend electric is the standard. You like electric? Okay, we're going to pretend electric's the standard. Let's see how well you defend your position. Now I come along with a gasoline powered car that no one's ever heard of. But I tell you, well, you know what? I can get the same range out of my tank that you can get out of your batteries. But it takes me 5 minutes to refill my tank, and it takes you 3 hours to recharge your shit. And we both have functionally identical fire hazards.
Right.
let's just be honest. It's called internal combustion for a reason. There is combustion involved. But my car is going to get the same performance. It's going to be lighter. I don't know if anyone's seen it wasn't the Chevy Silverado. I think it was the Hummer, electric Hummer. And one of these big trucks was like 8,000 pounds.
I think it was a Silverado.
Was it the Silverado?
I think
like
so.
Half of that is batteries.
I think so. I only remember that because it was the Super Bowl commercial. But yeah.
Oh, the shot for shot redo
of Sopranos.
Yeah. First of all, side note, I fucking love that truck. The E Silverado. I think it looks a hell of a lot better than the Cyber Schmuck. But okay, whatever. Go back to the example. Like, all right, well, here's my gas car that does everything your car does, but better. It's also lighter, so it's not going to tear up the streets as badly. It's not going to tear up your tires as badly. It's faster to recharge. It does functionally the exact same thing. Why is yours better? Like, if the status quo in this reverse situation would be an improvement, then your improvement is garbage.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that you talked about, people latching onto an idea. I think that's absolutely what's happening. Like, oh, you're an environmentalist, you're a greenie, but you're one of those hydropower people, and no, it's wind power is the real future. I can't trust you.
And that's the next question I was going to ask you, because we're going to, I was going to ask about EV cars and the movement towards electric vehicles, charging stations, and all that. But why do you why do, in your opinion, what is it about that technology that you think these environmentalists, why do they champion that cause? What is it about it?
I think the easiest answer is there's no tailpipe. It's rechargeable. Well, if we have green energy power generation and we have an electric car, then we have theoretically a closed carbon cycle of nothing getting spewed back into the environment. Okay, but again, I have to the mantra that I've discovered, at least in my work dealing with the critical and rare earth space and some of the investments that we're looking to make there. The adage that I love is, if you can't grow it, you got to dig it. And I don't know about you. I'm not a botanist, but I've never gone to Home Depot and seen a copper tree, and I've never seen a lithium bush. I think the people that champion this stuff are absolutely ignorant about where these things come from. Because if you've ever been to a copper mine, and again, there's a lot of abandoned, what are called AMLs, abandoned mine lands, out here in the Mid Atlantic, especially in West Virginia, Southern Pennsylvania, parts of Northwest Virginia. These places fucking reek. Like abandoned copper. If you've ever been to an abandoned copper mine, like that's one of those scents, much like a slaughterhouse, that you're never going to forget.
Hey
It is
man,
god
I
awful.
used to work by the Farmer John factory in Vernon, California, and let me
I
tell you,
saw. I was actually just going to mention that
oof,
one of my old jobs. That was one of their clients, and there's
oh,
another place in Fontana called Parallel Products that recycled soda. And
oh
so you drive
man,
by there at night, and it would make your skin peel off from the stench.
yeah,
And it's just one of those things. Like I think, again, I'm not the psychologist. I'm not the therapist. I think there's like a primal fear of some of these scents. Like, holy shit, that
yeah,
is not natural. But a lot of this stuff people just don't see. Like that's why, unpopular opinion. I think everyone should take their kids hunting at least once. It's either going to turn them into a vegan, or it's going to give them a lot. You have to develop an appreciation for how the sausage gets made, and I think the reason why people cling to this myth is I do believe they want to feel like they're doing good,
yeah,
right? You don't, and this goes on the fossil fuel side as well. The people on the other side of the argument, you cannot be that passionate about something unless you are convinced that what you're doing is right, that what you're doing is helping people.
yeah.
Um, but honestly, I think EVs are just kind of the cause du jour, and I've had multiple people come up to me and go off about electric cars, which I've already rambled about, but electric aircraft, and I have so far restrained myself from slugging them because I don't, obviously I don't agree with what they're saying, but I don't think it's their issue personally. I think it's like them not examining the problem and coming to grips with the fact that, well, maybe the answer is just using less stuff, right? Or maybe having lower population. We're not going into Thanos science,
Well,
but
I mean, we're already going to be hitting lower population globally, and maybe that's something we can talk about later or in
sure.
future episodes because people have essentially become pandas where they won't mate to populate their species. So, I mean, you and I we
Wait,
used to
so
joke about that. Look at Japan's
oh yeah,
downslide parts of the U.S. I mean, we could definitely go. I know one of the topics we cover in future episodes be like modern dating, pair bonding, and all that. But no, I mean, if you want to break it down, young men are getting laid a whole lot less. So, and in fact, most people who maybe don't already know, I'm a contributor onto another podcast that Willie and another gentleman, Vin, run called the Abolishing Nonsense podcast, and we discuss the rise of AI and sex bots. And this
that was
very
one of the
topic
best
is
episodes ever.
this is definitely
Recorded on any
covered.
medium.
But let me ask you: do you think so in reference to like EV vehicles? Look,
Mm,
we're we're at the age where we've seen a lot of fads when it came to technology. I mean,
sure.
for people who weren't around back then or younger, go ahead and Google things like laser discs, video CDs, right? Unfortunately, the Sega
I still have my
Dreamcast,
VCD of Thunderbolt, by the way, and a couple other Jackie Chan movies.
which is a great
I don't have
movie,
anything to play them on, but I still
which is a wonderful movie for viewers who like racing films. And we're big fans of the villain in that movie, played by the irreplaceable Thorsten Nickel, great German actor. Um, I had a short interaction with him before on social media. It was great. He's a true gentleman. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of technologies that just came and went, right? Do you think this is one of them? And what do you see? What do you suggest as, given just your knowledge of engineering
Mhm.
in general, you know, what do you think? So again, is this a dying technology? Is this a fad, a footnote in history? And if so, what do you suggest for the future?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, it already has been a fad. So back in ye olde timey, uh, there was a company called Baker that made the Baker Electric. I can probably guess what kind of vehicle that was. Um, and it actually had the exact same pros and cons as your modern Tesla. You had hellacious acceleration for the time, um, and you had quiet operation. You had all the same talking points, and you had the exact same drawbacks, as in how do you recharge the damn thing? And here's factoids for the listeners. If you go anywhere, if you go to restaurants, you'll see charging stations.
Yep.
They'll trickle into your car because the mall wants you to stay there longer and
Right.
spend money. Like
Yep.
there's that. But if you go on, I think it was Interstate 15, at the big Baker, right? The Baker exit. There's a wall of superchargers
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
other EV chargers there. You have this trade off between thermodynamic power and chemical power. Right, the battery is going to be your chemical power. Your level 2 chargers, which are what you see most frequently, I got it written down here. 240 volts and go from 0 to 80% charge in 4 to 6 hours. The level 3, the 480 volt, 0 to 80% charge in 30 minutes. Well, the first thing people are going to tell you when they're EV fanatics is, well, you should never let your battery go all the way to 0, which is true. You should not let it happen. But then I have to ask, well, why in the hell do I want to complicate my life further, to now like, well, I have to plan my life around my car, and like I need 4 to 6 hours, whatever. And it's cold because I live in a place with 4 seasons now. It's going to take longer to charge in the winter, or I don't live somewhere where I have a garage, or garage, depending on what side of the pond you're from, where I can secure my vehicle. I have to leave it out in the open. I have to find a charger. Well, I've seen chargers here in Philly that are literally shredded. The cables have been cut because
Yeah.
junkies are stealing the copper. Is that a Philly phenomenon? Well, maybe not. There's something to be said either way. But the point is, most people do not have the liberty. Even if you had like, okay, here's a $50,000 Tesla, we're going to give it to you for free. Let's not even argue money. It magically appears. Most people do not have the flexibility in their life, or honestly the desire to plan everything around this chunk of time to recharge their car.
Yeah.
Okay, and guess what? That was one of the things that killed the Baker Electric. And I don't want to say like, well, people are too stupid to manage their time. That's egotistical, and that's
Well,
non-productive.
I don't know. See, judging by how so many people always say, "Oh, I'll call you later," but I'm down to like 1% on their phone. And cell phones been around for how long now? I'm just saying.
Since Michael Douglas carried one in Wall Street, his 30-pound so-called portable brick.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, fine. I don't know. Personally, when people say I'll call you later, I just tell them, like, no, just send me a text. I don't actually want to talk to you. But it's the convenience is not something that you're going to get around. And it's not that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people are lazy. I'm not saying that people are stupid. I've already said that plenty. But it's the fact that realistically, most people just don't have lives where that is realistic. You know who do have lives where that's realistic? FedEx and UPS, for instance.
Yeah.
I think electric would be fantastic for them. Why? Because they have fixed bases. Those fixed bases usually have a maintenance crew complement. Their routes are not the same every single day, fine. But they're mostly same-ish. Like if you're in truck 37 and you're doing deliveries to Beverly Hills, they're not going to send you to Big Bear Lake the next day, right?
Yeah.
Like truck 37 is going to stay in its area. They come back at night. Their maintenance schedules are planned. There is some sense of permanency there that you can plan for.
What's the term for that? Is it short haul or something like that?
Yeah, short haul, the short haul, last mile, less than
That's the
truckload.
one.
Like
Yeah.
all of these, I think are fantastic.
Like Amazon would probably invest.
Amazon, well, yeah,
right?
that's why Amazon bought out the EV manufacturer
okay.
for their last mile deliveries.
Oh, it's nice to see they do that for everything. They'll buy out vendors. They'll buy out. Yeah. It's like, what is it? Ken Watanabe's character in Inception. It's like, I just bought the airline. I thought it'd be cleaner.
Yeah, it seemed neater.
There you go.
Yeah, stuff like that. I could see. I was like, yeah, I think that's a great application. The Tesla Semi, I guess, as long as you don't put on autopilot and drive through stop traffic, I can see being a fantastic application for that, because you have all of the advantages of electric motors. Like, people don't realize electric motors are hellacious torque monsters.
Yeah.
If you look at the power torque curve for a gas car, you'll have like the incline, you'll have a peak torque at some RPM, and then it'll fall. Most electric motors, at least the ones that you see a lot in EVs, their torque curve is flat. So you have 100% torque from 0 RPM.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and I've been in an electric semi that literally snapped my head into the seat from the acceleration. Like, this is really freaking awesome. But it's the ancillary, the support roles that come with it that are going to be limiting. So, but for consumers, I mean, I've always liked hydrogen. I will continue to like hydrogen. Everyone laughed at I think it was the Mirai that Toyota came out with some while ago, the hydrogen fuel cell.
That's a beautiful car, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my first choice. I like my truck, but if I were in the market for a sedan, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I live near a hydrogen station, I would probably give that one some serious consideration. So for consumers, I don't see EVs being a long-term solution. Like, hydrogen fuel cell would be fantastic. You get all the clean benefits, and you get the 5 to 10 minute fill up and go issue. And I think that what that brings up that you don't really hear a lot about is this kind of, you mentioned joining cults, right? It's like, well, I go to the cult of St. Mary's, and you go to the cult of the Episcopalians, and my God is better than your God, and then we have World War III. It's this mindset of either or that has been driven into us almost at the species level.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting to a point where, like, people really need to start understanding, like, there's no one solution. Okay, if you want to get rid of fossil fuels, fine. What are you going to replace it with? Number one, because I don't know if people realize you're listening to this on a device that has a lot of fossil fuel products in it, like plastics and like the nylon and rayon and polyester that are in your cheap Walmart shirts, or the poly blends and clothes. Like, it's a little more complicated than I just want to buy a Tesla. But when it comes to EVs, like, there really needs to be a conversation of, do we actually need more than one system? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we already have multiple systems with fossil fuels. I can't take my car. Well,
easy, Willie. Easy, Willie. This country, we're strictly a two-party system. Okay, we don't got time for no third party.
Sorry, Perot. But I mean, like, if I had a diesel car, I can't go fill it up with jet fuel.
Right.
I can't land my plane on the road and fill it up with road diesel. Like, we already have this built-in multi-system or multi-option system. When it comes to EVs or clean cars, let's just call them cleaner vehicles, I think that's probably the way that we need to go. It's like, okay, well, EVs are in this corner over here. The consumer cars are over here. The long haul semi trucks, well, maybe they do still need diesel for a while. Like, I don't know, but there needs to be this ending of this either or mentality, or no one's going to make any
Yeah.
progress.
No, how much of it do you think? And this is my viewpoint is a lot of the fossil fuel industry suffers from bad marketing,
Yeah.
whereas the EV community has very good marketing in the
Hmm.
sense that if you throw up imagery, and I've been part of these focus groups and I've done focus groups, and you find out what image resonates positively with people, and then that helps you kind of go in that direction in marketing.
Hmm.
Well, if you're to kind of like make an advertisement geared towards families, let's say, and you're trying to do a EV vehicle, all
Yeah.
you really got to do is show a vehicle driving on like through like Big Sur or the coast where it's like
Yep.
looks fresh. It invokes
Yeah.
images of the environment, cleanliness, just ocean air, things like that. All you need to do to repel people from like nuclear power is show a mushroom cloud. Nuclear power mushroom cloud, images of like Chernobyl, right? Things like that. When in reality, that's not actually accurate. But the power of belief, as we've said with environmental
Yeah.
protesters, you don't have to be right in order to actually be right in the minds of certain people because they're not looking for a correct answer. They're just looking for a answer they resonate with that they
Yeah.
can attach themselves to an ideology they can become synonymous with. And so marketing is not that dissimilar. I mean, we've seen it in our day and age. Like, say, I'm a big fan, as you know, of men's fragrances. I'm quite a cologne connoisseur,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah. You've educated me a lot on that.
to this day, the best advertisement I can recall in my generation for men's fragrances was Calvin Klein in the 80s and 90s. The
Okay.
contrast with color and black and white. And it helps that he used gorgeous models. Let's just be real about that.
Yeah.
But simple to the point, and it evokes this certain sense that you're putting yourself in that role. Now, subsequent commercials and all that gone off the rails, and it just looks like a cheap made-for-TV movie. But like, it kept it simple, but it works. And I think that shows how the EV environmentalist
Yeah.
products, for example, they can pass the sniff test because people
Mhm.
want some of that. They want to believe that I'm going to save the environment. Of course, they don't like the example you gave earlier is perfect. Like they just don't want to know how the sausage is made. And and I
Sure.
know the process itself is anything but environmentalist friendly, but people don't want
Mhm.
that. They want to
Yeah.
attach themselves to I'm saving the environment. I I get to drive on the freeway in the fast lane because my little sticker, but it tells everybody. Like the earlier Prius owners were like that. They were
Oh,
arguably more
they
condescending.
were insufferable.
They to me were more high and mighty than the Tesla owners.
Yeah.
But yeah, because like at the very least, some of the Tesla owners, I don't think they give two shits about the environment. They're just like my Model S
Right.
Plaid is super fast.
Yeah.
That's what they care about. Um, but yeah, there's bad PR. Like as a lot of people know, I'm an avid cruiser. I love going on cruise ships. Those things
Yeah.
pollute like crazy, you
Yeah.
know. And listen, I cry for the fishies and the whales, but I get over it when I'm getting my cocktail. But if there's a better technology, by all means, I don't go on a cruise ship because of the tech. I go to have fun. They replace it with something. Listen, they want to do steam engines again. I'd be fine with that. Go Steamboat Willie style. But you
Yeah.
know, but they can
But you
do that.
wouldn't run out of water for them on a cruise ship, I hope.
Right. But again, I that's the thing. It's bad PR. Uh, but what do you think? What are some reasons you think that people just are resistant towards the technologies you've mentioned, hydrogen, nuclear? What is it from
Well,
your standpoint?
I think a lot of it is just what I call political theater. I'm not the only one that calls it that. I didn't invent that. But you brought up a good point. Like I don't know how many people buy Teslas and buy Priuses, etc., or back then bought Priuses as anything more than a status symbol. I'm sure many of them did think that they we're doing something to reduce pollution. I'm sure of that. I'm also sure that the Porsche Macan diesel gets 46 miles per gallon. Uh, so there is something to be said for actually doing your own research. But I think a lot of it, maybe it's a groupthink mentality. I mean, we joked about flat earthers before, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that when you don't understand what goes into engineering a product from scratch, then you'll believe whatever the hell you want or whatever somebody else wants you to believe about it. And, you know, part of that has to do with the facts, again, just going back to education. I think there's kind of like an us versus them mentality in this country when it comes to education. I think science gets a bad rap a lot. If you don't believe me, let's just think back to 2020, and the listeners can fill in the blanks as they see fit, because you already know what I'm going to say. There's this kind of, I think there's this mentality like, oh, well, you're an engineer, what, you think you're better than me? I was like, well, if that's how you're going to act, I know I am.
Right.
And I'm guilty of this too. But I think a lot of these people, just need to understand, like, we in science are not actually fucking stupid. Okay, if there were a solution that all cars could run for 10,000 miles a tank using fertilizer and recycled piss, I promise you, everyone would have at least one of those cars in the driveway. If we in science, yes, a lot of us do pure research, a lot do applied research. Some, like me, do engineering, where you are taking the research and you are actually building an end use product out of it. What people seem to forget is we also like to get paid. We are looking for innovation, the innovation that you want, because we know that even the ones who are not profit driven, the career men and women who end up being senior tech fellows at their companies, who end up getting PhDs, who end up publishing and advancing the state of the art, even if they don't have a profit motive, if you tell them, I will pay you $1 million a year to try to make this happen, 11 out of 10 of them are going to say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like the ignorance is not just with regard to the science, but it's with regard to the fact that we're trying to solve these problems too. And I think just one of the worst things that gets overlooked. I had a friend of mine ran a family business that his forebear started in 1898, and he came up with what he labeled the 3 rules of consumer behavior, which are incredibly offensive if you just hear them in mnemonic form, but if you understand the principle behind them, they're actually really insightful. And the 3 rules are: people are stupid, people are lazy, and people want instant gratification. So yes, does it take effort to completely understand the problem at hand? Of course. That's why PhDs are 5 years after your undergrad. Like, you're looking at 10 to 12 years of college or more when you include postdoc and your starter lab and whatever.
Yep.
A lot of people just don't have the time, money, or effort or desire to go through that, and that's fine. They should not be made to feel like lesser than because of it. People have lives beyond, like, well, I don't understand this one engineering problem. Let me put my entire life on fucking hold and go make $12 an hour equivalent pay as a grad student, which, by the way, is what you get paid as a grad student. Ask me how I know. To completely understand this one problem that 12 people in the world are going to give a shit about, because that'll make me feel better when I make my decision as to whether or not to buy a Tesla. It's whatever solution is going to give them a solution that is easy to understand without making them feel stupid, that doesn't require a lot of effort to change their life. We talked about planning your entire existence around the recharge cycles, and that is going to give them what they're looking for right now. Like,
Yeah.
would I like a cleaner car? Sure. Am I going to go out and buy a Tesla? Fuck no. Because I know that's not the solution. So like you have to do all three of those. And you mentioned, fossil fuels have bad marketing. Yeah, they do. And nuclear do as well. And so Microsoft just recently announced with a group called Constellation Energy that they're restarting Reactor 1 at 3 Mile Island.
Yes.
Which, as far as nuclear accidents go, was nothing like Chernobyl. We talked about The Simpsons. The 3 Mile Island was a punchline. We thought we were getting a Chernobyl. We only got a 3 Mile Island. Yeah,
right.
But the fear is just so massive, and it's so overwhelming. And when you don't understand what's going on, when you don't understand that, hey, by the way, the U.S. led the world in breeder reactors that produce more fissile material than they consume, and we killed that program. We led the world with molten salt reactors that cannot melt down because it's designed that way. There is no, we can get into the technicals later if you want, but there's no way to have a Chernobyl event with a molten salt reactor that we have. Well, not we, but the Europeans have the Astrid reactors, the mirror reactors. Like, they don't know any of this.
Right.
And if no one's going to tell them, what do you expect them to do?
And I think this goes back to what I was saying about the space race and all that, and the culture that it produced in young people who became old people who worked on these next level innovations, right? Yeah. I have always called for the educational system and whatever to spark imagination again. And the thing is, I don't even necessarily mean imagination in science. You can mean imagination in storytelling. Because, for me, one of my big passions is writing. And I, like many people, am very concerned, for example, with like Hollywood's lack of original ideas now. It's just a remake or a reboot, whatever, right?
All reboots suck.
But people are starting to get tired of that, and the box office receipts reflect that. I think we've hit this tipping point where sometimes a return to the way things were, except in a modern lens, is maybe the reboot we actually need. So using your example of the solutions that work, but so few people know about them, I would say this should be a challenge to Gen Z. And I know they don't like challenges; they like complaints, but not solutions. But maybe I would challenge, if I'm like a 17-year-old kid who never had role models in his life, and I need an ideology, I need something to attach myself to. Instead of going heavy environmentalist or heavy fossil fuels, I would suggest a third option. Do what you're talking about. You know what? I'm going to go to school. I'm going to decide for myself, based on the schooling, where the tech is and where it could be, and possibly where I could engineer and innovate something new that could be a world changer. We need imagination more now than I think in my lifetime, because our lifetime, imagination, we had a surplus of it. We didn't have a deficit. People had lots of ideas. Like, granted, the generation we were from, a lot of those ideas were like, let's go find Bigfoot.
They were not all good ideas.
Not all good. It was like we were the X-Files generation. They're all looking for the abominable snowman and shit. But granted, but it went somewhere. It was trying to.
My homie.
Yeah, he was trying to find a solution. This generation isn't about the solutions. It's about, let's complain, get attention, because that gets eyes on us. They're not innovating. That's the idea. I've never met a protester that gave me a real solid solution. And I know that's oversimplifying it. Like, for example, there's a lot of things people can protest with civil unrest. There's no one solution, but I can't get many people to give me something that works. It's like, get rid of funding here, but it's like, well, that doesn't work, because now what are you replacing it with? You know what I'm saying? But we need people that can say, excuse me, am I the only one in the room here that noticed that no one is innovating? We're just like complaining, and you're complaining about the same thing that guy complained about last week, and he's complaining about the same thing that girl complained about last week.
Mhm.
No one is saying this. It's like that scene in Big. Remember with Tom Hanks when they're
I
talking about
haven't actually seen the movie.
it's like because he's a
I
kid.
feel terrible.
He's like a kid in a man's body, and he's in his room with ad executives, and they got this new toy. It's like it's a robot that transforms into a building, and he's just like, they're like, yes. He's like, I don't get it. They're like, what don't you get? He's like, that's not fun. Kids don't want to play with that. It's like a robot that just transforms into a building. Like buildings are boring. Why can't it transform into something cool like bugs or something? And people are like, oh my god, listen to this. He's a genius. You know? It's like, but he's just thinking like that's the most basic thing. He's like, the fucking robot, like it's a building and then legs pop out. He's like, that's boring. What are you talking about, right? But I think that's a lot of the problems we see today is no real innovation, but there should be. And the one thing I always would used to tell my subordinates, like my mentees, whatever, is when they're young, I'm like, you know all the criticisms and negative stereotypes of your generation, because they always ask, well, what do I got to do to move up in the world and all that? I said, you know what they say about your generation, so I don't have to remind you. So here's the thought. Do the opposite. They call you lazy, be diligent. They call you uninformed, be informed. They call you like dispassionate, be passionate. You know, do that. And so a lot of people
boils down to risk. Like you
very,
mentioned the space race multiple times. Well, I mean, I cannot confirm this because I can't find data on it. When I was at what used to be NASA Dryden Flight Research Center, which is now NASA Armstrong, I spoke to one of the base historians, and he was talking about this exact topic: why innovation and risk. And he mentioned that during the Apollo days, so they had a lunar landing module trainer, so basically a jet engine vertical with some pogo legs, and magic was done to simulate that thing flying here as it would landing on the moon for pilot training. And the historian was mentioning that during the Apollo days, especially with the LLM training, I think he said there was a 40% chance that you just weren't going to make it home that day. Right. Like your wife would get a knock at the door and they'd have you in a shoebox. And Apollo 1 had a fire that swallowed all three of her crew, and yet we continued, right? Like I can't imagine, nowadays the risk appetite that would allow those kind of odds. Like we've gone from failure is not an option, meaning we have to beat the Soviets no matter what, to failure is not an option as in let's not even fucking try.
Well, that's because you and I are from the space monkey generation. We're like monkeys ready to be shot into space, ready to give our lives for the greater good.
I already got the haircut from Fight Club for it. Just remember, his name is Robert Paulson.
His name is Robert Paulson. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right, man. This people are about less risk is better. It's better I stand behind you and you fall off, and then I know where the landmines are or something, right? But that's the problem, because history doesn't reward risk-adverse people. History doesn't remember the ones that risk so little, and in return they gain so little. Yeah. And that's the problem. I completely agree with you. And I mean, don't get me wrong.
Alexander the Great, not Alexander the stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. The Alexander the average, right? and that's why some people in this generation, that's why nobody will remember their name. They're not exactly the Achilles of this generation, though they are the Achilles heel in some cases.
Oh God, yeah.
And that's why, again, I don't want this to sound like I'm trying to disparage everybody in this generation. Rather, I call it more like a call to arms. Well, not literally. I'm not telling people to take up arms, but like not that they could fire them. They can't shoot. But anyway.
I mean, unless you're in the defense space, in which case
maybe if you're a young person in Arizona, you're definitely proficient. But I'm just saying, like, I want this to be a challenge to the young people in the same way that it was a challenge to our generation to do better. Like, I look at it like, come on, man, I don't want to get cheesy, but when I was a kid, but I traveled outside of city limits where the pollution was down, so you could actually look up, see like a ton of stars.
Yep.
Dude, I immediately, my mind went to space, and I'd be like, it's like that movie. What's that? With those kids travel to space, the Explorers.
Well, I mean, I was thinking Rocket Boys, but I think the Explorers is what you're.
You know, when they build their little spacecraft, they go into space.
There were a couple of those in
a lot of them,
in the 80s
yeah.
that were kind of questionable value of cinema. It was the Explorers, Space Camp.
It was so many. I mean, hell, like the Last Starfighter, you know. But the point is, like, you imagined yourself, but beyond, right?
Yes.
So that is freaking awesome. I mean, to do stuff like that. Like, how many people grew up, like, for example, like, you saw like Top Gun or something, and then you're like, I wanted to design the 5th generation fighters or something, right? Or they see.
I actually saw Top Gun. That's what made me want to be a pilot. Only took 22 years to get my certificate.
That was the first movie I ever saw in the theaters. My cousin took my brother and I was like, oh man.
My parents had dropped me off. I was supposed to see some garbage with one of the cheerleaders from my Pop Warner football team. She didn't want to be there. I was like, well, okay, I don't want to be with you either. I actually movie hopped from whatever garbage to Top Gun.
Man.
The best decision I ever made.
Yeah, dude. It was just, again, there's just so much innovation, right? And I don't see that as much today. I mean, I see innovation in other areas, but there are areas that are widely politicized, which we can go into that in a future episode. But but like, I want to see people saying, I don't like EVs, but I don't like fossil fuel either. I want to challenge myself to come up with something even better, right?
Yeah.
You know what? It just shows the power of movies. One line I loved, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to paraphrase that Captain Pike has in that Star Trek reboot. I'm talking about reboots.
One of the few good reboots.
Although technically not a reboot because it's alternate reality, so not a reboot. But where Captain Pike is talking about Kirk's father, where he says like something to the effect of like, your father was captain for like 5 minutes, but he saved like 10,000 lives. I challenge you to do better, right? When he says, "I challenge you to do better," dude, that was a powerful statement. But it takes risk because you have to risk losing, but also risk tarnishing your father's legacy. There's so much that came into that decision where he joined it. He was great, And Chris Pike did such a good job of that too. Mm-hmm. But like, that's what I'm talking about. Challenging people to do better. You complain about the boomers and Gen X fucking the planet up. Do better. Show us better.
They can complain better than we can.
Yeah, but I'm saying take us to school. Set us straight, right? So that we can be like, guys like you and I could be, years from now in retirement in a senior's home saying like, well, they certainly showed me. Show us up. Prove us all wrong,
Absolutely.
I would love to see that, man. I would love to see like my nephews be part of a generation that at some point just says, wait a minute, hold on. Why do we keep complaining about shit? Let's just fix the problem, right? And then others are like, oh, that's a novel idea. You become a leader from that kind of thing, right? I'd like to see someone in a leadership role innovate that way and challenge people to be like, I know prior I don't want to say administrations, but kind of sort of, where like it's like this idea of let us take care of you, let Big Brother take care of you. But it's like, how about let's take care of each other? Look, a lot of small communities know this. Like, people can say what they want about like middle America and all that, but like, look, anytime I've ever traveled to a small community, and I'll just share a quick story. Like, I used to own a Eclipse GSX, and
hell yeah.
I ran into a little issue when I was in just the border of California and Oregon, and it broke down. Had a problem with the crank and everything. Which, if you're
a clutch slave cylinder,
the crank walk. If you're a Eclipse owner, you already know. You already feel my pain. You're probably gritting your teeth right now, and just cringing. But like, I stopped in this town. It was like a Chrysler. I happened to stop close to a Chrysler dealership of all places. Dude, these mechanics, and it was towards the end of the day too. Yeah. They all come in, help me push my car in. They told me the problem, they diagnosed the problem, and they just said, listen, we can fix it, but it's going to be like a week because the parts got to come in. And I was like, dude, I got to go back to work, in Seattle, Washington. I said, is there anything I can do to remedy this for like the 800 miles I got to go or whatever it is? They said, listen, there's a thing we can do. You pour fluid into the thing every like 40 miles. It's boring as shit. And you're barely going to be able to get it into gear. But technically it's feasible if you're disciplined. And I was like, I will try it. Yeah. I did make it. And let me tell you, those guys didn't take a dime. I had to force the head mechanic. I had to do the old handshake with the 20 in my hand. Yeah. And I had to double grip them to make them take it. Okay. They were ready to help me. These are all white dudes, by the way. And and I had this idea that it was going to be like, oh man, but no, they were the friendliest people. I had to force this guy to take just something for helping me. And they spent like a couple hours. And so that's what I mean. Like people can be friendly and all that. And it's just, let's go back to that. Let's innovate and let's not be adversarial, and that's what I mean. I think there's a place for it. It just takes some very remarkable people to just raise their hand and say, I think there's a better way, Yeah.
Well, there are better ways. And, we talked a lot about, battery EVs, but there's ultra capacitors. Those don't get enough screen time, I think. And, I don't even think, like now after the election, I noticed how certain parts are backtracking. Like, let's just be kind. I think it's a good sentiment. I don't necessarily think it's the right one. Let's just focus on getting shit done.
Agreed.
Right. Like as a country, like I've noticed there was, at least when my parents' generation, my parents were born in the 30s, so it was everyone else's grandparents' generation. And, my parents were also immigrants, but that undoubtedly had something to do with it. But there used to be a notable sense of pride in whatever you did. Like I don't recall growing up with and seeing the same kind of looking down on other people, for what? Because they think differently than you. Like, who gives a shit?
Only in the movie Revenge of the Nerds.
Only nerds. In reality, all those guys would be asking the nerds for help because the nerds were all going to be billionaires and marry supermodels. And that's how it should be. But it's just, I think it's just an issue of pride. Like, have some goddamn pride in what you're doing. And if you're not going to do anything about it, then stop bitching. Like, and I'm not saying don't protest. By all means, not only should you protest, I'm sure there are psychological reasons for it that are
absolutely
beyond my ability to understand.
Some of the greatest movements were through protest. However, they were very solutions focused, I would say.
Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth. I was also going to say, you kind of probably should protest. You do have a constitutional right to it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, use it. But if you're not going to focus on getting the job done and changing things, well, what are you doing? And if all you're doing is talking, well, you know what? Unless your goal is to be a world famous orator, and if it is, congratulations, good for you. But if that's not your goal, if your goal is to affect change and all you're going to do is whine, then shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Schwarzenegger's line from Running Man. All I see is a bunch of low foreheads that want to change the world with dreams and talk. That's not how it works.
He says, unless you're willing to act, give me a break and shut up. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned higher learning. I recall it was Lawrence Fishburne was one of the professors in that.
Yes.
And what was the closing exchange with him and Omar Epps' character as without struggle there is no progress.
Yeah.
And Epps goes, Frederick Douglass, and walks out. And the Fishburne's like, right, whatever accent he was doing. Like these things are supposed to be hard. Like people have to remember, again, sense of scale. Most real science is going to agree that modern humans have been around roughly 40,000 years. Okay, approximately. For the majority of that 40,000 years, we're walking around on our feet, And it wasn't until the late 1700s that the Montgolfier brothers took people up in a balloon, which doesn't seem like that much of an accomplishment these days. But I'm sure at the time, everyone was shitting themselves with fear and excitement. And it wasn't until, people think, well, the Wright brothers invented flying. No, they didn't. Otto Lilienthal and Pierpont Langley, and then there was a lot of work on flight, fixed wing flight prior to the Wright brothers. And it's like we've spent tens of thousands of years traveling at 3 miles an hour, and we closed the 20th century being able to travel at Mach 25. So it's like, if you want to change something, good, but don't be so conceited to think that the world owes you change within your lifetime. Like, that's the thing with science. Most of the stuff gets proven out after you're dead. Like, we had like the Gravity Probe B space mission I think it was measuring gravitational tidal forces. Einstein first proposed that over 100 years prior to the launch. He wasn't around to see it. I think people need to address this issue with a little bit of humility. And it's like, yeah, you want to affect change, but guess what? You are not the center of the world. Okay? Like, you may be long dead before your efforts have any meaningful impact. And if you're not willing to accept that, then you should probably question, is this really something that you are passionate about, or do you just want the recognition?
Correct. That kind of instant gratification can't be your sole driving force. It has to be actual innovation and change, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about like the Wright brothers and Langley, and like, the guy I think about that's the complete opposite of all that is that Frenchman that jumped off the Eiffel Tower with his squirrel suit because he thought he could like land safely. That is available online, by the way. If people want to watch that gnarly black and white video, it almost reminds me of the Looney Tunes when they fall off the cliff and then like the little puff of like the dust. It's you want to see something like people? Hey, watch that. And
well, I mean, it's not funny. It's tragic, but it is funny to watch.
No, it's not funny. It's hilarious. Hey, comedy is his tragedy in time, my friend.
Okay, Mel Brooks. No, I mean, and I think that's a good point. I think the people that make the most impact are the ones that are either selfless, or they're driven to the point of just maniacal obsession to where I don't think they care if they're hated. I think they need to be hated because deep down they know that's their barometer for knowing they're doing the right thing. You mentioned Elon. Well, there goes the other half of our listeners. You can love him or hate him, or both. I'm also I don't think he gives a shit, and B, I don't think it's going to change. Like when Steve Jobs was still alive, you mentioned him in pre-show. Yeah, everyone thought, he's not inventing anything. He didn't do it. Well, first of all, he wasn't an idiot. And second of all, okay, all the haters. I hate Steve Jobs. I hate Apple. Well, what have you done that's better? Oh, you bought a Zune. Congratulations. You're so fucking insightful.
Yeah, people I think downplay the need to have visionaries. Because, yeah, we know
Sure.
Jobs he didn't code, he didn't do well. They had Wozniak for that. But the thing is, there are lots of guys in Silicon Valley that can code. They have very analytical minds, but they're not visionary minds. It takes like an Elon, definitely a Steve Jobs, someone to innovate things in order to make it work. But the great leaders that are also visionaries put together a team of people, of remarkable people, I might add, that can make that dream a reality. And that's why people attach to that person's vision. It's not even the person. This isn't like a cult of personality. It's like people say Jobs and Musk are notoriously hard to work for in some cases. They're very fickle, but you're not following the man. You're not following the man's vision. And that happens a lot in society because a person's vision can become greater than them. A man, we're just flesh and blood. we
Yeah.
we have an expiration date. Our vision doesn't. You know,
If a man devotes himself to an ideal,
he becomes something else
something
entirely. Something unkillable. You know, that's exactly right. And I think so many people lose sight of that because maybe they don't think it's possible for them, or maybe they think it's just not the world they grew up in. I notice a
Right.
lot of people who grow up in like maybe like poor communities where maybe they think like maybe they're taught, don't try to stand out, just get a job and work a
Mhm.
9 to 5. And I'm not saying that's bad advice. We're on the record of saying, hey, if you can get a trade that pays you well and has job security and provides what you need, by all means, we need people who work for a living. Okay.
Mhm.
But if you're someone who just isn't afraid to raise your hand in class and ask questions and say, I think I have a better way.
Yeah.
If we need people like that too,
Yeah.
and the younger you come to that realization, the better. Now, I'm not saying, be a jackass in class and just be like, hey, teacher, can I go to the bathroom, and then you're just going to ditch class. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real ideas that can move the world forward, that help you be remembered. And
Yeah.
I hope people listening can make that differentiation. We're not just saying this sucks and this sucks without offering what we think is a good solution. I like to think we are. We're trying to challenge people to do better, be better. In some
Yeah.
ways, it used to be that immigrant parents, I use that as an example, what was their dream for their children? They wanted their kids to do better. They wanted their sons and daughters to do better than them, right? They came here to start over, but to give kids an opportunity to have a better life, but to also accomplish more. And I think maybe that's the case with people who've lived here for generations. I don't know. We'd have to ask them, but certainly that was the case. My parents. I know that was the
Mhm.
case with your parents, because we know what they left, and that's the thing
Yeah.
that is really, really crucial. But we also know where they knew they were coming, and it's this idea that for my parents, they were just like, they always taught me this country. My grandma too. She taught me like this country did a lot to help us. They kept us safe.
Mhm.
Now
Mhm.
go out there and do something for this country, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
just don't just be somebody with their palms up asking for more. We didn't raise you to be like that because you didn't have this crummy life that we just want you to keep having this crummy life. I had a decent life, and they want me to do even better.
Agreed.
So yeah.
Absolutely agree.
So, Willie, thanks for coming on, my friend.
Of course.
I'm
My pleasure.
glad you added some scientific legitimacy to this ragtag podcast. Hope to have you back.
Anyway.
Hey, I hope to have you back for future ones. And
Of course, there's lots of topics I'm sure I would happily piss people off about.
hey, and thank you for being unfiltered and just definitely stating your opinion and also what you think could be viable solutions. And I hope that our viewers, like a lot of viewers, I get the sense, are not going to be in the scientific community, but it doesn't mean they can't Google stuff, because I think you've given people a lot of food for thought, particularly with hydrogen energy, different applications of nuclear energy. And I like to think the both of us have kind of just provided some fuel for innovation and imagination, and just hopefully if we have younger listeners, to challenge them to do better. But even if you're older, hey man, we can pivot. Both of us are examples of people who kind of pivoted. Where we're at now is not necessarily where we thought we would be right out of undergrad, right? So
I mean, high school, I was convinced I was gonna do plasma physics and maybe astronomy, and thank God that didn't work out. But yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with reinventing yourself.
yeah.
I mean, who cares? I mean, if other people think it's weird or whatever, show them
Hey,
the finger and
as
keep
long as
living your life.
as long as the reinvention of yourself is into someone better, I think we're all for it.
Sure.
If you devolve into like a caveman or something, then maybe that's not good.
Then we will mock you endlessly, and you will deserve the mocking.
You'd be like those, we're mocking you. You like those Geico cavemen, for the generation that remembers that really brilliant line of commercial advertising. But yeah. All right, Willie, brother, I will see you next time, and thank you for listeners for tuning in.
Bye-bye.